The LG V30 and Samsung Galaxy Note 8 are two of the biggest Android flagships right now. They're not exactly direct competitors though. If nothing else, there's a big price and size difference between them. Still, they're both significant launches in the Android calendar from two companies with a well-established rivalry. I'm Alex from Android Central, and I've been using both the V30 and the Note 8 for the past few weeks. Here's what I think so far. Some housekeeping before we get underway. The V30 I've been using isn't final hardware just yet, so we're going broad strokes in this first comparison. Remember, things can change between a pre-production phone like the one I've been using and a final boxed retail product. Although LG attracted some criticism for aping Samsung's design language with the V30, these two phones look and feel dramatically different once you get them in hand. The Note is tall, heavy and chunky. The V30 is wider yet slimmer and lighter, with more of a curved organic feel. LG's phone is infinitely easier to use in one hand, even with its relatively large 6-inch screen. The fingerprint scanner is way easier to reach too, and the phone itself is nowhere near as tall, making reaching the notification shade less hazardous. That said, Samsung has a really decent one-handed mode, although it's not enabled by default. Both phones have excellent build quality on account of the very similar materials used to build them. The Note feels more substantial in the hand, a lot of that is just the extra weight, but I also appreciate the more angular corners of Samsung's phone. There's also the fact that you're dealing with the very overt curve on the screen of the Note 8 compared to the ever so slight angle of the V30's display. That's mostly a matter of personal taste though. So on the whole, it's kind of a draw in terms of design. I prefer the stark, slab-like look of Samsung's phone, but I really appreciate the greater ease of use that LG's more ergonomic design gives me. I do think the sheer height of the Note is going to be a deal breaker for some people though, whereas the V30 is more of just your standard big phone size that so many of us are already used to. The displays of these two phones offer you more of a clear-cut choice, once again in terms of size if nothing else. The Note 8's proportions are a bit taller, with an 18.5:9 aspect ratio as opposed to the V30's 18:9. Still, the jump from a 6-inch screen to the Note 6.3 is palpable. And this comparison underscores why Samsung, for the moment at least, remains the king of OLED in smartphones. Not only does it have an eye-searing 1200 nit daylight mode that gets activated in very bright conditions, but it also adapts better to darker situations. The Note doesn't crush shadow details like the V30 screen does. I don't want to talk down LG's POLED panel though. In most situations, it's great, and a marked improvement on the G6. The only problem for LG is that the Note has arguably the best screen in any phone. Audio is yet another point of contrast. LG has its fantastic quad DAC built into the V30, which brings some added punch to wide audio. That's something you'll miss out on the Samsung side, and actually a feature that's unique to LG among all its competitors. Elsewhere, it's kind of a wash. The bottom-facing speakers of both the V30 and Note 8 are nothing special, but at least both come bundled with decent quality earbuds. Samsung gives you AKG-tuned buds, whereas LG's partnered with B&O Play. Overall, in the audio stakes though, it's a win for LG thanks to that quad DAC. LG has also managed to fit wireless charging inside all V30 models this time around, not just those sold in the US, which brings it up to speed with Samsung, a company that's included this feature in all its flagships since 2015. There is one truly unique hardware feature that's still exclusive to the Note though. That, of course, is the S Pen. No one's even trying to compete with Samsung anymore when it comes to a stylus on a high-end smartphone. For me, the use case for the S Pen hasn't really been about drawing or note-taking, but rather using it in a way that I'd use a trackpad or mouse on a PC. Samsung's built out a ton of proprietary features around the S Pen, many of which are great, but for me, it's the precise input that it gives me that has the real value. That's something that only the Note can offer. As for LG, it's gotten rid of the old second display from earlier V-series phones, instead replacing it with this floating bar, and like I said in our initial review, I'm not a huge fan of this. The options there aren't massively useful, and it animates too slowly to really save you any time, but at least it's easy to turn off. On the inside, both phones offer very familiar spec sheets. Snapdragon 835 and both in the US. Internationally, Samsung uses its own Exynos equivalent, 64GB of storage as standard, and 3300 mAh batteries. Samsung's ahead on RAM with 6GB to the V30's 4GB, but I don't feel like there's a huge advantage there for the Note in day-to-day performance. Maybe it's a little better at keeping apps in memory, but the difference is tiny. The bottom line is that both phones are really strong performers. Even battery life is pretty much identical across both models. Despite the larger display of the Note 8, it has mostly kept pace with the V30 throughout my daily usage patterns. Both will give you a full day, though probably not much more than that, with between 3 and 4 hours of screen on time while I'm outside on LTE. Both phones are IP68 rated as well, meaning they're sufficiently water resistant, good enough to survive a dunk in the sink or to be used outside in the rain. LG has often lagged behind much of the Android competition in terms of software, while Samsung has only recently started to build out a UI with a futuristic vibe that genuinely looks good. However, both are on pretty firm footing with their latest phones. The Note 8 software is all but identical to the Galaxy S8s, except for some new S Pen features and subtly improved performance thanks to that extra 2GB of RAM. Meanwhile, the V30 takes what we knew from the G6 and tunes up its performance, while also smoothing out some UI hiccups. LG's haptic feedback has improved too, as has touch response. There's nothing overtly weird about the way LG software looks or works, and considering how overcooked some of its earlier software efforts have been, that's an important development. Overall, I think I prefer the slightly more futuristic feel of Samsung Skim, but I am absolutely fine with the look and feel of LG software as well. Perhaps the biggest functional advantage for Samsung comes with its multitasking features. As well as multi-window, which is now a standard part of Android, you can save pairs of apps to load at the same time, and quickly load apps in a floating window, which is a great way to take advantage of the Note's enormous screen. There's also a helpful one-handed mode gesture, which is something you'll miss out on the V30. And finally, the one area where the differences between the V30 and Note 8 really show, the cameras. Around the back, both feature dual camera arrays, but they work completely differently. Samsung gives you two 12-megapixel sensors, a standard camera behind an f1.7 lens, and a telephoto camera with an f2.4 aperture. Both are optically stabilized, giving the opportunity to capture clearer low-light zoomed shots. On the LG side, it's all about wide-angle photography. The standard camera has a super bright f1.6 lens, though with smaller pixels on the sensor than Samsung, just 1 micron as opposed to 1.4 on the Note. And then you've got a 13 megapixel 120 degree wide angle shooter behind an impressive f1.9 lens. There's no optical stabilization on LG's second lens, but still, the company has made huge strides in low light performance in the wide angle since the G6. For the most part, the main cameras of these two phones are so close as to be near identical. The focal length of LG's camera is slightly longer, and Samsung captures slightly more color detail, whereas LG favors sharper, fine detail. But besides that, these two main cameras basically provide an identical experience. Both are highly capable, whether you're shooting in conditions with challenging dynamic range or at nighttime with very dim light. The biggest question is whether you want wide-angle photography or a telephoto lens. There's really no correct answer for everyone here, it's more a question of personal taste, and personally I prefer the added freedom that being able to capture a dramatic wide-angle shots gives me. It's always been one of my favourite things about using an LG camera. Samsung's telephoto option is all well and good, and can capture some unique shots in its own right. However, I don't feel the telephoto is a huge value add, the live focus mode of the Note 8 is hit and miss, and there's clearly some software work to be done there. LG also has some unique video features loaded on the V30, the most promising of which is the new LG Cinelogue mode, which captures footage in a way that lets you bring out more shadow, highlight and colour detail when you process it later. The Note 8 is a capable video camera in its own right, with impressive software stabilization, but if you're going to process your video in Final Cut or Adobe Premiere, you'll find LG's shooting mode will give you more freedom and likely better looking footage at the end of it. Ultimately, it's really hard to call an overall winner here. These are two great phones that take different approaches to their design and have different priorities in terms of the technology and the feature set. If you go with the V30, you'll save a couple of $100 compared to the Note 8, while getting a more portable handset that's easier to hold and just as fast, with fantastic wide audio capabilities, some unique video recording features, and a really fun wide-angle camera. Go for the Note and you'll pay more, but get a bigger phone with a better screen, all the functionality of the S Pen, the best telephoto lens on any smartphone, and a great looking software loadout with more multitasking options than you'll know what to do with. If your buying decision comes down to price, especially if you're purchasing outright, then maybe it'll be hard to justify the extra cost for the Note compared to the cheaper and equally capable V30, but if you're the kind of person that wants the biggest, most powerful, most impressive handset, then there's no denying that's the Note 8. Hit the comments and let us know which one you choose, LG V30 or Galaxy Note 8, and subscribe so you don't miss our coverage of both phones here on YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.